Hi, this is Sharon Smyth Lentz, the original Sarah Collins, Dark Shadows, and you're watching the virtual Coast City Comicon on Entertainment Experiment.
How many Dark Shadows fans in the crowd? Yeah! This is Sharon Lentz. I guess let's just start with the basics. How did you become involved?
With Dark Shadows specifically, it was just another audition. I had started doing modeling with Sears and Roebuck's catalog when I was a little girl. It was fun. And one thing led to another. I had a personal agent at the time that worked with children, and she asked my mother, would you consider going up to New York for an audition for a commercial? And my mom, having no background in the business, said, sure, sounds fun. And we went up, and it was a room full of lots of little girls, all kinds of, dark hair, light hair, a little bit of everything. And at that time, and this was in the 60s, yes, in the 60s, I had long dark hair and I had freckles across my nose, and I was the all-American little girl, and that, I feel, won me a part in my first commercial, which was for Post cereal with the sugar bear. I don't know if you remember the sugar bear. That's when cereals, you were allowed to say sugar in the name of it.
Super Sugar
Post Sugar Crisps, yes,
Yeah.
Super Sugar Crisps. That's
Bank robbery! He's a big kid, all right!
And you can see that online. In fact, someone sent it to me, and I put it up on my, not on my web page, I put it up on my fan page, my Facebook fan page. And that's so cute. I'm sorry?
You know, it had the little bear with a sweater going, oh, super golden crisp.
Well, in this particular commercial, it's a bank robbery, and it's fairly violent. And I mean, seriously, and it's long. It's a long commercial, and it's, trust me, they would never get away with that commercial in this day and age.
Yep.
You know, kids tying people up, and
Gun?
I think there might be a gun in it. Yeah, it's not politically correct anymore. But it was a different time. Yeah, it was a much more innocent time. But that was a wonderful experience for me. I was just a little kid. I got to run around with other little kids, and everybody was really nice, and we got a paycheck for it. How cool is that? So I started to do more auditions, and I started to get more commercials, and again, I really felt like it was because I had to look. And I wasn't afraid of people, and my mother was not just so in case anyone's wondering, my mother was not a pushy stage mom. She was quite the opposite. She was very laid back and kind of just took it all in stride, and oh, this is fun, let's do this, which I think really had a good effect on me. I didn't feel stressed, I didn't feel pressured. I wasn't like what I hear the little kids on those, Toddlers and Tiara. That was not my experience at all. I was very normal. Well, I was treated very normal as a little kid, and I had to do my homework, and I had to go to bed at a certain time and that kind of thing. But it was a fun experience. And as Dark Shadows, the audition, I really didn't know anything about it when I went for the audition. It was a soap opera. That's all I knew. And my mother was a soap opera watcher. Search for Tomorrow, General Hospital, so I kind of knew what that meant, daily performances. And I went in with a lot of little girls, and then they did a callback. I had to go back another day, and there were less little girls. And then I went back again, and there was one other little girl, and I happened to know her. She was a friend of mine in the business. Her name was Eileen Burrell, and she was very waif-like, very thin, long blonde hair, big blue eyes, and she had already portrayed a ghost in, I believe it was like a wagon train show or something like that. So, we were playing, and I just kind of in the back of my mind knew that she would get the part because it was for a ghost. Well, much to my surprise, that wasn't the case, and I got the part. And in looking back, I believe, and I don't know this for fact, but I believe a lot of it may have had to do with the fact that I looked more like Jonathan Frid, who played Barnabas Collins, than she did. He was dark, and that's in my own mind, but I think that had a lot to do with the choice between Eileen and I.
Do you have to explain the character that she played on the show? Do you all know who she was? Barnabas'
if anyone's
little
not
sister?
familiar.
So it's a
Jonathan was a vampire, and Sarah Collins, his little sister who died at 10 years old from exposure, could have been pneumonia, could have been whatever. She was running around the cemetery getting all wet and, she got sick and she died. I got to, and I came back to him to not haunt him so much as to be his conscience, his Achilles heel, to plead for him to stop doing the bad things that he was doing. When I first went on the show, I was a ghost. And then they went back in time to 1795, I believe.
Yes.
There you go.
I went back in time, so I got to be alive. I got to be a live little girl. And I got to wear pink, and that was cute. I wasn't in my mop cap in my dreary little outfit. So I got to be a live little girl as well, and then I had my big dying scene. Oh, Barnabas. Which really, I've had people ask me, was that scary? Was that upsetting? You were a little girl, you were dying? It wasn't anything like that. It was playing for me. It was pretend for me, completely and totally. And the character of Barnabas, played by Jonathan Frid, he was such a sweet man. He was a big man. He had hands like, I still remember, he had huge hands. And I was little. I was petite for my age. And he was just so nice to me and encouraging. And even if I was a little bit nervous, he would relax. We all make mistakes. Don't worry about it. Just do your thing. It'll be fine. I mean, he may not have said it in that vernacular, but that was the attitude that I got from him. All of the adults, Joan Bennett, who was a famous film star, was on the show, and no airs about her. She also was there to do a job, to work. She was nice to me. So it was a good experience for me in that way. So anyway, the dying scene was no more than pretend. The hardest thing for me to do in that dying scene was to keep my eyes closed. Because any Dark Shadows fan will tell you that little Sarah Collins' eyes were darting all the time. A lot of people accuse me of reading cue cards. They say, you were reading cue cards. That really, honestly, was not the case, because I didn't read that great that I could be reading cue cards and doing it at the same time. I was newsy is what it was. And if something was happening on set with a cameraman or the boom guy, or I wanted to know what was going on. I'm just a newsy person by nature. So, I was doing this, but it came so easy to me that I also was paying attention to everything else that was going on. So in the big dying scene, it was rather difficult for me to stay there and keep my eyes closed and not go, what are you doing over there? But it wasn't scary even a little bit. It was a pleasure to have fun and be a little girl that got to play house, kind of, and run around in great long dresses with little ballet slippers and feel dressed up.
I'll ask questions throughout, but
I'm
feel
sorry,
free
I talk
to...
too much.
No, she could do the whole thing. She could do the whole thing. And she should. But if you have questions at any time, just ask. And if you don't, I'll just keep throwing softballs at her.
I'm a very, you will realize very quickly, I'm a very approachable person. I'm a very open person. I have nothing to hide. I had a great experience, and coming back and I've been doing Dark Shadows conventions for years. This is one of my first forays into a different venue. So I feel like a fringe person at this event, which is fine. But I'm very open about my experience, and I'm trying to use my experience in Dark Shadows to come back and start something new. Be it web series or independent films or anything else anyone else wants me. well, within limits.
Careful.
Yeah, I know, right? Stay away from Sal.
Yeah.
He's a scary Santa. I'm like no interest in being Mrs. Santa. But within reason. I really would like to do something fun and productive and creative. So if anybody has any great
If there are
ideas.
creative Dark Shadows fans out there, we are really lucky to have someone as open as Sharon and so interested in being a part of, whatever we have in mind. So,
And because of that, I have developed a lot of really very close and important relationships in my life with fans that were once just fans, and now they are truly, dearly my friends. And I know about their lives, they know about my life, and I feel enriched by that. I feel blessed by that I've had that opportunity through Dark Shadows. So how cool is that? You know, I have friends in other countries, for heaven's sakes.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about what it was like being a little kid on the set back then. How many kids? David was a part of the cast, but what was that like, being amongst all of the adults?
Right. When I was on the show, and I was with adults a lot, but David Hennessy, who played the young boy at the time, who was about a year older than me, he had already been on the show for a little while before me. So he knew all the ins and outs of the studio, how different directors worked, and he had the lay of the land. So he was very helpful to me, because I was kind of shy. I know you find that hard to believe. But I was kind of shy, and, you know, I was a good girl, and I did what I was told, and that was about the extent of it, you know. He would prod me and get me in a little bit more trouble. We had more fun, but he would get me in a little bit more trouble because of he already knew what was going on. There is one funny story what was funny, it's funny now. We were playing on set, and he told me that I should get into the coffin. We're going to play hide and seek. But he was telling me where to hide, which really kind of is silly, isn't it? But he said, you know, being in the coffin would be a great place to hide. I'm like, It wasn't like it was scary. It was just weird, but okay. So I get in the coffin to check it out, and he closes the lids to see what that's like, and he sits on the top of the lid and won't let me out. And it wasn't, I mean, I do have a little bit of claustrophobia, and it wasn't like I couldn't breathe or anything like that, but it was unnerving. I want out, you know? And coupled with the fact that I was supposed to perform very soon. I was going to get called to be on set very soon. I came about that close to missing a cue because David thought it was hysterical to keep me trapped in there. I didn't get in trouble that time, but that was fun.
Did you get in trouble?
There were a couple of incidents where people weren't really happy with myself or David because of our antics. One scene, and it's pretty noticeable, we have a scene where we're sitting stride-legged on a fallen tree, and one of us missed the line, or, you know, made up a new line, and it threw the whole thing off. But being the professionals that we were, and understanding that this show was live to tape, there were no do-overs. Nobody was going to yell stop and start over again. We both were more than aware of the fact that you better just keep going, regardless. So when you watch it, it's rather comical because we're bantering back and forth, and some of it is not making much sense, and then something clicks, and we kind of got back on the road again. Well, when that scene ended and they went to commercial, there were a few adults in the darkness behind the cameras that were not too happy. But you know what? The fans had no clue. And, well, maybe now when you look at it, you do have a little clue that something went wrong there, but it wasn't that bad. Little things like that got the adults tense.
Was Mom on the set?
My mom was on the set, but she was very laid back. Mm-hmm. She got me there, she got me ready. Mostly she stayed in the dressing room. Back when I did Search for Tomorrow, though, I have to tell you a story. They had swinging doors with the little windows at the top, and, you know, the light would go on. They were on air. And that was a 15-minute soap opera. It was live, real live. I was 8. This was the show that I had the dying scene from the asthma in. My mother, I could see her pacing outside the door. Her little, and my mom was only less than 5 foot. I could see her little head pacing back and forth because she was a wreck that I would screw up and whatever. It didn't happen glaringly, thank goodness. But on the set of Dark Shadows, we all know it was pretend, right? I don't want to upset anybody. The sets were relatively 3-sided, and it was beautiful. The sets were beautiful. You'd have 3 cameras. It was back in the day when they were behemoth cameras with big cords and whatnot. When I was not performing, when I was not, having to do my job, the guys behind the cameras and the booms and the sound effects guys, they were great. They were my buds. They'd let me climb on the cameras. They had like platforms around them. And they would let me climb up on there and, you know, mess with the stuff a little bit. Enough that I felt special. And the stairways that went nowhere. In the foyer, there's a big, beautiful staircase that goes up to a landing and then down to a door. Well, behind that door was nothing. There were, I believe, fire steps down from that. You know, those movable things that you see in the Home Depot? There was that kind of thing behind it. But I loved playing back there. And I loved playing with the pretend cobwebs. They would spray it. They had a machine that would spray these cobwebs, and it was like rubber. And you would pull it off. It was great. And they'd roll it up in a ball. And at the time, Super Balls were very popular. And I thought I was making my own Super Ball. So, like, I mean, you have to remember, I was 10 years old. So the things that were fun to me, the things that I remember distinctly, not like the adults, you know, obviously. But it was pretend. It was playhouse. It was, I knew that everything was fake. The grass was AstroTurf. Again, I'm sorry if I upset anybody. I know, right?
The trees, though. The trees were real, right?
No, the rubber trees. Well, actually, one time I was walking through the cemetery and my dress caught on a tree, and I knocked the tree down. I knocked a tombstone down. The AstroTurf got pushed up. Yeah, it was.
What a neat thing
Bummer.
to be able to have that chunk of your childhood on tape somewhere that you can go back and watch at any time.
The first time, when I was done, Dark Shadows. I did a few more little things, commercials, but then I went back to Philadelphia to my real life and my adolescence, and I didn't watch Dark Shadows. I never thought about it again. In 75 or 76, the show came back on after Mary Hartman. I don't remember what channel it was, but the show came back on, and I was very excited to watch it because I had not seen it. There were no DVDs back then. I had not seen the show in all those many years. And I remember sitting up at night watching it, and as soon as little Sarah came on, I got so excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's so cute, you know? And I oftentimes say it was like watching home movies in a weird way, you know? It brought back all those memories from being on set. I watched a couple episodes and then I didn't watch it again for a long time. I kind of just wasn't my thing. It was on late at night and I didn't watch it. Even within the last year, and we're talking, that show was 45 years ago. I cringe when I say that, but it was. That's the facts. A friend in the last year heard or read in an interview that I had done that I never watched the whole series from the beginning to the end, those over 1,200 episodes, and actually sent me the whole thing on DVD and said, you have to watch it. And I'm like, okay, fine, now I have no excuse, I will watch it. But yeah, it's if you go into it not knowing anything about it and you're starting now and you go and you watch it, my first impression was, ooh, you know, technically speaking, it's kind of like just not as crisp as what I'm used to, you know, no CGI in it, which is a good thing ultimately, but no CGI in it, and every once in a while you see a boom, the microphone come into the screen, little things that are wrong, bloopers, and you kind of go, ooh, but if you let yourself get into the storyline of it, to the characters of it, I assure you will, if you haven't already watched it, you will get sucked in. You just will. It's a beautiful thing. It's gothic. There's romance, there's rivalries, there's a little craziness in there, no doubt about that, but really is a beautiful thing. And how iconic, none of us, the adults even, no one had a clue that the longevity of it, that it would have lasted this long, that there would be new followers. You know, I have teenagers that come to conventions and they're just as excited as the people that ran home from school to watch it. So that's exciting. I mean, somebody called me iconic, and I just thought that. I giggled. I thought that was funny. Me? Really?
You're royalty. You are Dark Shadows royalty. And I think that you would probably, if any other shows of the time were available on DVD, you'd see a lot of those same booms and stuff. I think that the fact that Dark Shadows is so popular is why that is available
endearing
to watch, you know. But I think you would probably see that if you watched The Search for Tomorrows and that whatever was available at the time, the General Hospital of
and you have to understand that when they were making this, It was live to tape. It was not unlike theater in that you kept moving. They made an episode every day. I mean, over 1,200 episodes. They never in a million years thought that it was going to be on DVDs, so it wasn't like they were all that concerned.
Sure.
Get through the episode, and move on to tomorrow's episode.
Because they won't see it again after that. We'll have
Exactly,
done it and
it's
move on.
done. Yeah, and not the case.
Right.
Now, true fans, they pick it in a loving way, but they pick it apart. They know every nuance of the show. You know, I usually deflect to the true Dark Shadows fans. When I don't know information, I'll ask them. They always know. What episode did you speak French in? Yeah, I spoke French. You know, and they're like, yeah, your nanny was teaching you, or your governess was teaching you French. I'm like, really?
So, I mean, you pretty much said it. I would imagine, I would wonder if you could talk us through what a day would be like back then. I want to keep taking you back there.
That's fun.
Just because I'm curious. Like, going there in the morning, I'm guessing, you know, coffee and rehearsals. How did it all work?
It was a long day for a little girl. It was a long day for anybody, actually. My mother and I moved to New York City. We were from Philadelphia. Had a very normal childhood in a row house. You know, my father worked in a factory. But during this time period, because we couldn't be going back and forth, my mother actually took an apartment in New York City on 72nd Street, West Side. And we would take a cab, actually. We didn't do public transportation very much, which is kind of surprises me now, knowing my mom. But we would take a cab over to 54th Street, like 8 o'clock in the morning. I remember it being early. I have this funny physical memory of being cold and tired and getting in the shower in the morning, and it's kind of like takes me back there. But we would take the cab over and we would go into the studio. There was a little elevator that you would go up, and it was kind of elevators where they had people that ran the elevator. I love that. I love that. And we would, you know, the highs to the security guy and whatever, and go in. And I had a dressing room, albeit small. It was cute. Didn't have a star on the door. Didn't even have my name on the door, I don't think. And then we would go into this big room, you know, with long tables, banquet tables like this, and mirrors and whatnot, and go over the script. And you're right, it was coffee and Danish in the room, and the adults were all smoking, because this was back in the day, you know. And a lot of them had sunglasses on, not because they thought they were movie stars, but because a lot of them had jobs at night, you know, and they'd be crawling in the morning, and who knows from what, but everybody had their glasses and their cigarettes and their coffee, and I just thought it was great because it would be catered. They'd have these big trays of Danish piled up, and I was 10 years old. It was like a sugar high going crazy, you know, and I would stuff Danish, you know, and eat my fill, and my mom wasn't there. She was usually doing a crossword puzzle or whatever back in the dressing room, so I was a little bit unsupervised. But we had fun, and we would do a run through early in the morning. And most of the adults would go into makeup. And I didn't really have makeup, but I would like to go in there and watch, especially during the portion where Jonathan turned into an old man, because I got to see a lot of very cool makeup artistry. They would put pieces on and, you know, paint over them and whatnot. It was very cool. And the ones that were messed up, the fake noses that they didn't use and the wrinkled brows that they didn't use, they'd throw them on the floor. They just were busy doing their thing, and I would pick them up. And I remember for a long time I had about 6 pieces. I know that sounds really silly, but I had about 6 pieces, and eventually they all kind of melded together, and I had to throw it away.
Does anyone know, was it Rick Baker that did the makeup effects on Old Barnabas in the show?
No.
He might have done it in the movie.
It was Dick Smith, I believe.
Dick Smith?
Dick
Thank
Smith.
you.
He did the movie. I don't know that he did the show. I'm trying to
Might
think
have
of
done the
his
show.
name. It was a little Italian guy.
Oh, Vinny was.
Vinny, yes, Vinny was my guy. He was adorable. Sweetest man ever. And he would let me hang out. And to be honest with you, thinking back on it, nobody had to let me hang out anywhere. I was a little kid, you know, like, don't you have coloring to do, you know? But they would let me sit in a chair and play around and play with their stuff and, you know, be all like, ooh, that's cool, you know. So I have fond memories of
Were there
that.
fans around in the morning when you guys were coming in?
I have to be honest with you. I have read about these fans,
Mhm.
and I know it's true because I know those fans now as adults.
Sure.
My mother must have shielded me from that. I don't know if she took me in another door. No, we came in the front door, or it was a timing thing.
Mhm.
But I don't ever remember coming out to a plethora of fans.
Mhm.
But I have seen many, many pictures where Jonathan and Catherine Lee Scott and Louis Edmonds and Joan Bennett were inundated with fans. So it was happening, but I really wasn't affected by it. Now, I have to tell you, out in my real life, though, I would have people walk up to me on the street, in the local swimming pool, and at the mall, you know, well, they were strip malls then, but at the mall, and say, "You're that girl. You're that girl." And I'd go, "No, I'm not." And they go, "Yeah, you are. You're that little girl from Dark Shadows." And I'd be like, "No, I'm not." And they'd be, "Yes, you are." And I go, "Okay." And they go, "No, you're not." Okay on that, you know. But it was the long hair that was a giveaway, because, you know, it was kind of trademark for that performance.
And you had fans as well. You had fan mail.
Oh yes, I got a ton of fan mail, and people wanted to be my pen pal, and I have since apologized to the fans at some of the conventions. When I first went back, I apologized to them because I didn't get it. I was young, I didn't get it. I did not write back to everyone that wrote me. I did not send a photograph to everyone that wrote me. And I have no greater excuse except that I was a little kid and, you know, got away from me. I'd rather go out and play. No. But now, through the beauty of Facebook, I can be way more attentive and involved with the fans, and I really appreciate that. And again, it's on film. It's on film that I apologized.
I've seen it. Yeah, that's why I asked. And if any of you aren't friends with Sharon on Facebook, she's active. She's on there, and she's, you know, so.
I have
friend
2
her.
Facebook
Yeah,
pages
that's true.
and a website, and I have cards at my table if you want the information. It's real easy, sharonsmyth.net. But I try to keep current on the web page of things that are coming up and photos and stories from things that have happened to keep people involved, what's going on. There are links on there also to some of the other cast members that are very active. You know, David Selby, Jerry Lacey.
Laura Parker's big on there.
Right.
Catherine.
Right. So there are links to other, I mean, if you're not interested in me, if you don't really care about me, you can get in contact with some of the other characters that are still very active. And on the One Pro page, Facebook, I try to keep it current with up and coming events. Now my other Facebook page is just me. It's me, it's my kids, it's my cats, it's my rats, it's my, you know, whatever's going on. But again, I'm pretty open with my fans about what's going on. They like that.
Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Yeah. Hi.
Do you remember Dan Curtis at all?
I do remember Dan Curtis. Dan Curtis was also, and this wasn't just because I was little, he was a big man also, physically a big man. He had a big presence. He was the kind of guy that came into a room and you knew it. He was dark, big hands, a little loud. A little loud. Knew what he wanted, wasn't mean, but knew what he wanted and wasn't shy about telling you what he wanted and how he wanted it done. And hence he got things done. What can I say? Nice guy, but a little gruff.
How involved was he day to day? How involved?
Oh, he was always around.
Yeah.
Always around. Even if it was just walking behind the crew that was working, he was always in the readings. Almost always in the readings, in the morning. And then I kind of segued away from the fact that they did makeup and then they would go back and do dress rehearsal. There was a lunch in there, albeit usually it was the guy with the truck outside, you know, nothing fancy, believe me. Relatively low budget, I think. And then you would come back and do it, real time, do it. And then they actually would start reading for the next performance, even a little after. I mean, we were there till 5, 6 o'clock at night. So it was a long day. But Dan Curtis was always around. You would hear him in the sound booth, barking, whatever, you know. Nice guy, again, but, you know, had to do what he had to do. I mean, he was it was his dream, it was his thing, he was the mastermind behind it. A lot of good writers underneath of him, and a lot of good actors. You know, some very, very new to acting. And this was awesome stage for them to start their careers. Catherine Lee Scott, it was one of her first professional acting jobs.
Laura was her first.
Yeah,
Um,
which is I think that's very cool that it's a
absolutely.
great ensemble of characters.
Do you, do you want to talk a bit about what happened after Dark Shadows ended? Like,
Bum, bum, bum.
Dun, dun, dun.
I have to laugh. I made available at one of the conventions I went to copies of my bye-bye letter, which people seem to find fun. Because I think a lot of people wanted to hear the big story of, like, why did they axe you? You know, and to be honest with you, my contract was up. That storyline ran its course. Little ghost girls don't grow up. And I was starting to not be so cute anymore and starting to grow up. And it was just a very natural next step. That's done. We move on to something else. It wasn't like, you know, you blew a line, you're out of here. No horror story like that. So when I left Dark Shadows, it was not tragic to me. It didn't have any great effect on me. I didn't have to go into counseling. I had done my job, and I moved on. And I have this lovely letter thanking me for fulfilling my contract, and blah, blah, blah. It's been really nice, you know, nothing bad. I keep that for proof for people there. It wasn't bad. After Dark Shadows, I did do a couple more commercials and voiceovers. But again, I have to be very, very honest. I was hitting the ripe old age of 13. Hormones were kicking in, and I was getting rather obnoxious. And I remember specifically having an audition for, I think it was a peanut butter commercial. And I didn't want to smile. I didn't want to eat the peanut butter. I didn't want to be there. So I was uncooperative. And my mother, in a very laid-back, nice way, said, look, I am not traveling up to New York and doing all that we need to do if you're not going to cooperate. If you don't want to do this anymore, then we're not going to do this anymore. And I said, good, I don't want to do it anymore. And she said, fine. And I will be honest with you, that was it. Tied up with a bow. Done. My mom just said, it's a waste of everyone's time if you're not going to do it. And I was perfectly fine with that. I wanted to hang out with my friends. I lived in Philadelphia. The big thing was hanging out on the corner with your teenage friends and, you know, just doing your own thing. And that's really what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be traveling back and forth to New York. I didn't want to be away from my friends. I wanted to go to school. I wanted to be a teenager. And my mom was completely fine with that. That was the end of my career. Now, I have to tell you that when I was in my young 20s, I got the itch to do something again. And I kind of tried to dip my toe back in there, and they wanted me to do, you know, mom pamper commercials and toothpaste commercials and Tampax commercials. And I really envisioned myself being the girl running down the beach doing the Dr. Pepper commercial. But I wasn't tall and I wasn't buxom, and that wasn't going to happen, you know. So, I had to get real and say, I'm not interested in doing what needs to be done in order to pursue this career. So I didn't do anything again until after I was 25, and the itch was still there. It's always there. And I started to do community theater, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the camaraderie of the people. It was a lot of fun. It was nerve-wracking, but it was fun. And I did that. I did about a dozen shows over the course of a few years. And then I had this new itch. I had to have a baby. And I started having children. I have 2 children and a stepdaughter. And that's all time consuming. And it takes a lot to do what you do, Barb. You know, to be in the business, it takes a lot. And I wasn't willing to split myself that way. I wanted to have a family so desperately that I felt that once I had one, I needed to give it 110%, and that's what I did. In mid-'80s, I was contacted to go to a Dark Shadows convention. This came out of nowhere, like into my regular, normal, everyday life. I was working for an insurance company, and I get this invitation. At first, I was like, I don't think so. You know, like, that's kind of strange. I didn't even think it was legitimate at first. Again, I wasn't online or anything like that.
Come over to my
then.
house.
Yeah, it was a little weird, you know. But I went, and it was fabulous. But I have to tell you a funny story about that day. It was a luncheon in New York City, And I went up there by train, I believe, or bus, whatever. I got there, it was at a little Italian restaurant. I went in, I told I'm with the Dark Shadows crew, you know, whatever. So they sent me back into this little tiny banquet room, not much bigger than this. And there was a big table set up at the front, and then there were circle tables down here. And there were people milling around, and there was things going on. And I asked somebody, and they said, oh, well, all the talent from Dark Shadows is going to sit at that top table, and then just, you know, everybody else. So I took my little shy self, and I went and I sat up at the front table. And this woman comes up and she goes, you can't sit here, that's only for the people that were on Dark Shadows. You have to go back there. And I went, and I had dark hair. I wasn't always white. Had reddish brown hair, whatever. And I just looked up there and I said, I was Sarah Collins. And she went, oh my God! And I never saw anybody like turn 9 shades of red like that. She was a wreck. She was shaking. She's like, I am so sorry. I'm like, no, really, it's okay. If you want me to sit back there, I'll sit back there. No. And with that, someone said to Jonathan, who was, you know, regaling people with his stories, said, Jonathan, your little sister is here. And he turned around and without missing a beat, the actor that he is, walks over, now I'm 25, 26 years old, walks over, swoops me up in his arms like a baby, and he says, little Sarah, you've come back to me. It was a moment that everyone will cherish forever, and someone was smart enough to get a picture. Oh. And this is before camera phones, when everyone was doing it. Someone took a picture, and I have that picture. And you can go buy it, yeah. It's a very, very special moment, especially to the people that were there. For him, just the way the whole thing came together. And that was kind of my resurgence, my re-entrance into the world of Dark Shadows fandom. At which point I started to go to the convention every year in New York City or Newark or, you know, wherever it was close by me. And I would go and be treated like royalty for a day and then go back to my husband and children and insurance job the rest of the time. But it's been a great experience, the whole Dark Shadows fandom thing. So
let's talk about that. Let's talk about the legacy of the series. Like, what sort of experience do you get one-on-one with fans? Because I know you meet lots of amazing people, and people are inspired, and there are new versions of Dark Shadows. It lives on. You know, talk about the legacy.
Absolutely. Wow. There are so many. I'm always surprised by this, or I don't know, joy-filled with this. There are so many people across the spectrum that have a reason to love Dark Shadows. There are, and I never recognized any of this before I started talking to fans. The depth, the layers that are involved with the show of Dark Shadows and why people are attracted to it and what makes them stay attracted to it and what inspires them to be creative, to do something that is Dark Shadow-esque, you know, or even straying away from the vampire aspect of it, but the gothic part of it. There are people that are homebound that live vicariously through Dark Shadows and Dark Shadows fandom. And I love that. I love that there's that lifeline for them. People that are writers, new writers, just coming out of school, that were inspired by Dark Shadows, that are doing comic books, fan fictions, even a web series that was kind of birthed because of a love of Dark Shadows. Barry's a Dark Shadows fan. Karen is a Dark Shadows fan. He got the inspiration or the idea to do a web series. It's called Ragged Isle. It's fabulous. It just started its 3rd season. And it's won awards, Indie Soap Awards up in New York City, and they've been in the UK and won awards inspired by Dark Shadows. There's even a nod to Dark Shadows throughout the episodes that you'll pick up on. You can see it on Entertainment Experiment, Main Base. Gotta watch it. If you go to my website and my links, on my Facebook page, there are links to that as well, and I encourage you to take a peek. You'll love it. The characters from Dark Shadows, a lot of them have gone on to do other things. David Selby is a wonderful actor, doing one-man shows. Laura Parker has written several books on I don't want to say witchcraft, that's not the right description.
Lore.
The Angelique stuff.
Yeah, she's done some background on Salem and her character of Angelique, and she's written 3 books now.
It's a whole new career for her.
Yeah, absolutely. And Laura Parker has her own publishing company, Pomegranate Press, and she has written not only books about Dark Shadows, about her career, she's even written fiction and some photograph books and historical books as well. So that's a whole nother venue for them. All started with Dark Shadows. Where else can we go with that?
You talk sometimes about some of the people you meet and how they were affected by the show, and it's a surprise sometimes.
It is.
How deeply people hold that show and certain characters, and how it can relate to their own lives.
For many different reasons. I mean, you know, some of these people have been latchkey children at home and didn't have anybody. Some of the stories are kind of sad. They didn't have anybody and they felt alone, and you know, maybe they were the odd man out at school. They didn't have like lots of friends. They weren't involved in cliques. They got involved in Dark Shadows, and it allowed them, it opened up a whole new world for them. It allowed them to kind of lose themselves in the fantasy of it. Also, there's a lot of people that maybe had something that they held, they were shy from, they were trying to hide from the rest of the world, were they closeted for whatever reason, that the character of Jonathan, who was has been referred to as a reluctant vampire, held a secret. He was vulnerable. He was doing things he didn't want to do. He was a nice guy, but, you know, so he struggled with that. And a lot of people in their young teen years were struggling with whatever in their own personal lives, whether it was a health issue or a family issue or a sexual issue, whatever it was, that they were battling that. And Jonathan, Barnabas, allowed them to feel a kinship. Like, oh, I have a secret too. Oh, maybe I don't have to hide mine. Maybe I can get past this. And I've had people actually tell me these stories where they were like, oh, thank goodness for this, because it allowed me to embrace my individuality, to embrace who I really was, to know that being different isn't necessarily a bad thing, that I can work with what I have. You know, so those stories, oh my goodness, so many.
Sure.
Just again, I said such a spectrum of people that I've been involved with Dark Shadows, that have told me these stories. I've had people that were raised in very, very religious homes that wanted to watch Dark Shadows and were told absolutely not, it's from Satan, you know, and they would sneak to a neighbor's house and watch it. Yeah, and then they'd be like, I don't know what the big deal is, you know. I've had people tell me that there were representatives came to their school and gave lectures on how they shouldn't watch Dark Shadows. You know, not unlike what happened when the Harry Potter books came out.
Yeah.
You know, people were going into Christian school and saying, this is bad.
One of the things that, you know, I was too young the first run of Dark Shadows. I was born the Friday before the show premiere.
Oh, wow.
But I found out growing up doing some TV history stuff, actually working background some TV stations and radio stations, that the Dark Shadow fandom was willing to find it wherever it was.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the history of Dark Shadows, how it ran in Boston, was sometimes it was shifted to 9 a.m., thrown on the UHF station, crappy kinescopes, things like that. But people still found it.
Mm-hmm. They had letter writing campaigns. Again, this was before the whole internet thing.
Exactly.
They would, by snail mail, contact each other. There were small fan bases, and they would do letter writing campaigns to the local local TV stations, and anybody else that would listen to them, that we want this, get it back on programming. And it worked a few times. I actually have pictures, or you probably could find them online, of them picketing different places. You know, en masse, they would show up somewhere, we want Dark Shadows back, you know, and it worked sometimes, and sometimes it didn't. Unfortunately, back in the 70s, the Dan Curtis Productions sold to MPI, World Vision, to do the VHS tapes. at that point, things really changed as far as what they could do to get it out there. I guess there was money to be made in the VHS tapes, so it went that way. And then obviously the DVD, but it's coming back.
It is.
It's coming back.
It's on the
The
internet
fans
now.
still want it but they want it out there, available to everybody on the TV, as well as the internet. So they're still pulling for it. Dark Shadows fans are hardcore. They're not giving up.
I heard it might be coming to MeTV. I don't know if that's
Some-
a rumor
some-
right
You do
now,
see it
Some
on.
nostalgia channel.
Yeah.
I heard it was scheduled. For.
Once in a while I'll catch it. You know, I don't know if I have in a while, but I mean, this is totally off base, but
It's
the
okay.
reboot, the 90s
The
Star
91
Trek,
revival
They,
series?
they play that on a sci-fi, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, sci-fi
Right.
or chiller, I can't remember which one, but I mean, they'll play that all day long for one day.
Right.
And I'm thinking, well, if you can do that,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I just went to a convention this past summer with some of the people from the 91 revival series at Lyndhurst Mansion in Tarrytown, New York, which was way cool. Beautiful place if you've never had the opportunity to be there. And I got to meet some of the cast from the 91 revival series, and
Yeah.
they were really good. Ben Cross wasn't there, unfortunately.
I actually enjoyed it. I don't
Right.
like it, you know,
No, it
killed
was
or
really
anything
good.
here, but I did like the.
Absolutely, it was
you know,
very
I just,
well done.
I just kind of view those kind of things as like, it's a separate thing. You know, it's, you know, this is Dark Shadows, and then this is an homage.
Right.
You know.
Oh no, it was
movie.
very
Yeah.
well done.
I
well
thought
acted,
so too.
great
I watched it,
costumes.
yeah, it'll be on.
And Dan Curtis put his stamp on it. You know,
Yeah.
that's canon because
what I'm
it's
saying,
because
yeah.
it's Dan Curtis.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well,
You know,
we're almost
what's
out of
great
time.
about what's
Yeah.
great about a lot of films that are remakes isn't the fact that they're all that great a lot of times. It's the fact that a new audience with new cinematic whatever's up to date get a chance to see the movie and everybody's eventually going to say, well, this over here is
The
Right.
was the
We'll
original and
point
it's
them back.
actually a lot
And
better.
that
Yeah.
happened with the Johnny Depp movie. I've had young people say to me, I went and I saw the movie because of Tim Burton and Johnny Depp,
Right.
and realized that it was based on an original series, and was curious,
Right.
and went and checked it out, and fell in love.
Right.
Exactly.
And hey, thank you.
And
Kudos
you've got
to
a
you
whole
for
new
that.
generation, parents,
Absolutely.
children, and
Absolutely.
everything. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
So you're gonna be at your table after this to
I am.
meet
Photo
all
ops.
these people in person? Okay, we're just about out of time, but
See, I told you I could talk for an hour.
We did it. We didn't even need the script.
I didn't give you
I
enough time.
apologize for no screening. If you really had your heart set on that, I apologize. It's not my fault.
But it's more time to hear Sharon talk. So.
That's right.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you have any additional questions that you didn't feel like shouting out, I will be at the table, and I'll answer just about anything.
Let's hear it for Sharon.